The After the Affair podcast with me, Luke Shillings, is here to help you process, decide, and move forward on purpose following infidelity. Together, we'll explore what's required to rebuild trust not only in yourself, but also with others. Whether you stay or leave, I can help. And no matter what your story, there will be something here for you. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to the After the Affair podcast. I'm your host Luke Shillings and today you're listening to episode number 198. I want to start today somewhere quite specific. Not with advice, not with a framework, but with a feeling. The feeling of being frozen. Not confused exactly. You probably know your options. You've mapped them out in your head more times than you can count, I'm sure. Stay or leave, trust or don't. Tell them how you really feel, or maybe keep it to yourself a little bit longer. Move forward or keep waiting for more certainty before you do. You know the options. You've turned them over hundreds of times. You've run each scenario to its absolute logical conclusion. You've imagined a version of your life that follows each and every single choice, and yet somehow you haven't moved. Not because you're incapable of deciding, not even because you're weak, not because you're confused about the facts, but because underneath the practical question of stay or go, trust or don't, there's a quieter, slightly scarier question that nobody is really talking about. What if I choose wrong? What if I make this decision and I can't undo it? What if I commit to staying and they hurt me again? What if I leave and I regret it? What if I trust and I'm wrong too? What if I wait and miss the window? What if I move forward and it turns out I moved a little bit too soon? That fear, that specific, particular fear of choosing wrong and being unable to undo it, is what I'd really like to spend today's episode talking about. Because I think it's one of the most common experiences in the aftermath of betrayal and one the least honestly examined. When people are frozen in a decision, and I mean genuinely frozen, not taking a considered pause, but stuck in the same loops for weeks or even months, they almost always have a very clear and very reasonable explanation for it. I just need a bit more information before I decide. I need more time. I need more certainty. I need one more conversation. I need one more sign, maybe one from the universe. I need one more piece of evidence that will make this decision just seem, obvious. When I have enough information, the right answer will become clear. And this explanation feels entirely rational. Trust me, I have sat in front of hundreds and hundreds of people saying just those things. Because decision making in most areas of life does actually benefit from more information. You know, if you're choosing a house, you get a survey. If you're making a career move, you research the company. If you're investing money, you study the market. More information before a significant decision seems sensible. It's logical, prudent even. The problem is that the kind of certainty being chased in decisions like these, stay or leave or trust or don't, isn't the kind that additional information can produce. You are not trying to discover a fact that exists but hasn't been found yet. You are trying to know in advance what your future feelings will be, whether they will be different from who they are now, whether you will regret this, whether you will be okay. And that information, it just doesn't exist anywhere. It can't be researched. It can't be found in another conversation, another therapy session, another month of watching and waiting. It lives in the future. And the future, bit of a shocker here, cannot be accessed from here. So the search for certainty, it continues. There is no choice. At least that's how it feels. And the decision ultimately doesn't get made. The weeks pass, and those weeks then become months, and in some cases those months become years. And the waiting, which began as a perfectly reasonable pause for reflection, has quietly become something else entirely. Here's something else that I want to name directly, because I think it gets missed in almost every conversation about decision paralysis. Waiting is not neutral. Staying undecided is not the same as having not decided yet. It is a decision. It's just one that nobody is naming as such. Look, every day you spend in the space between staying and leaving, between trusting and not trusting, between moving forward and holding still, that is a day you have chosen to remain in uncertainty. That is a choice, and it has consequences. It does cost something. Perhaps not the same thing a definitive decision would cost, but it costs something. And every day that a painful situation stays open is a day your nervous system remains in a state of unresolved threat. Every day you don't move is a day you don't build whatever it is that comes after that decision. Every week spent waiting for certainty is a week not spent creating the life that would otherwise follow the choice. And the fear underneath the waiting, what if I choose wrong, doesn't actually reduce over time either. If anything, it compounds, because the longer you wait, the more weighted the decision becomes. The more days have passed in limbo, the more it feels like this choice has to justify all of that waiting. So it gets bigger, and the fear of choosing wrong gets bigger with it, and the waiting extends. I'm not saying this to create unnecessary pressure. I'm not saying that you should have decided already. I'm saying that the experience of waiting for certainty, while feeling like a very responsible postponement of the decision itself, is often the most costly position of all. Not because the decision itself is urgently needed, but because the waiting produces its own harm, quietly, day after day, in ways that don't get counted because nothing dramatic is happening. Staying undecided isn't safety. It's just distributing the same fear across more days instead of concentrating it into one. I'd like to get a bit more personal here, because I think the most useful thing that I can offer on this topic isn't theory, it's honesty. Look, when I was in the aftermath of discovering infidelity in my own marriage, in that period where the relationship could have gone either way, where the decision about whether to try to rebuild it was still genuinely open, I did not feel certain. I didn't feel certain that staying was right. I didn't feel certain that my wife and I could rebuild what had been broken. I didn't feel certain about my own feelings, about where they would land in a year's time, about whether I was making a choice rooted in genuine desire or simply in the difficulty of the alternative. And I remember very clearly that in that period, what I wanted more than anything else was exactly what I was telling myself I needed. More certainty. One more piece of evidence, one more conversation that would make the right answer, obvious. The thing that saved me from that loop wasn't certainty, though. It was structure. Specifically, I set 3 conditions immediately after the discovery. 3 things that would need to be in place for me to even consider continuing. Not a guarantee that it would work, not a promise that I'd never feel doubt again, but 3 conditions, a container, let's say. Something that let me make a decision without first needing to know how the decision would turn out. And then I built in a review point, if you like. I didn't commit forever. I just laid a specific point in time for which I would honestly reassess. Not because that time was going to make everything certain, but because it made the decision manageable. I wasn't being asked to decide how I feel in a decade. I was being asked to decide what I was willing to try for the next 30 days. And that was a decision I could actually make. That's the part I want you to hear. I didn't wait for certainty. I built a structure that let me decide without it. And there's a significant difference between those 2 things. There's something else I want to be honest about as well. I've said it before in various conversations and specifically in the work with my clients, but I think it also belongs in this episode explicitly. Even now, having rebuilt a life with the woman that had an affair in my relationship, having done the work of rebuilding our relationship, having come through the other side of what was genuinely one of the hardest periods of my life, I still cannot tell you with absolute certainty that choosing to rebuild was truly and fully the right decision made for entirely the right reasons. There's about 5% I still can't fully resolve. A quiet question that occasionally raises its head, that doesn't have a absolute, certain, definitive answer. Whether I chose to rebuild because it was genuinely what I wanted, or because there was a small part of me inside that was afraid of what not doing or not taking that risk might have looked like, it's something I reconcile. And I have ultimately built that life. I've built this new relationship on the 95%. I'm telling you this not to create doubt about the possibility of rebuilding. I'm telling you this because I think that the fear underneath of what if I make the wrong decision, it contains hidden assumptions. The assumption that certainty is available to good decision makers. Now, I'm going to stick my hand up and say I'm actually a pretty damn good decision maker, but I don't have certainty. It also, I think, leads with the assumption that people who make the right choices make them with full confidence, full clarity, and absolutely zero unresolved doubt. And that if you're still carrying doubt, it means something's wrong. It means you don't know yet. It means the decision isn't ready. It means you need to wait until the doubt is gone. Honestly, that's just not how it works. Certainly not for me, and not for most people navigating something this significant. Look, think about the decisions that you're most proud of in your life. The ones that turned out, as it happens, to be right. The ones you'd make again. I would guess that most of them were made carrying some real, unresolved doubt. Because that's what decisions under uncertainty actually look like. They don't look like clarity. They look like choosing regardless. The 5% I couldn't resolve didn't make my decision wrong. It made it human. And the same is true for yours. I want to take it a step further though, because there's another piece of my own experience that I think is also relevant here. Not all of the significant decisions I've made in my life felt emotionally resolved at the moment I made them. Some of them felt practical, even unromantic, in ways that surprised me. Some of them were made from circumstances rather than from the internal clarity, and some of them turned out to matter enormously. Decisions about financial and legal protection made during the aftermath of betrayal, not because I felt emotionally certain about the direction of the relationship, but because they were the right practical step regardless of how things turned out. Handing in my notice from a hospital bed, a moment of calm clarity, a decision made from exactly the kind of messy, uncertain, complicated circumstances that we tend to think of as wrong conditions for good decisions. And yet, these decisions mattered. They shaped things significantly for me. They were, in the ways that count, right. And I don't think I would have made them if I'd waited for the moment to feel certain and emotionally clean, because that moment wasn't coming. The circumstances were what they were, and the decision had to be made from inside those circumstances, not from a hypothetical calmer version of them. I say all of this because I think there's a quiet myth operating underneath most decision paralysis. The myth that right decisions feel right when they're made, and that the right choice announces itself through the sense of clarity or peace or certainty. And if those feelings aren't present, the choice isn't ready. But some of the most important decisions in life don't feel resolved when you make them. They feel like the best available option in difficult circumstances. They feel like the most honest answer to a question you didn't want to have to ask. They feel like a step into uncertainty taken deliberately, knowing the ground isn't yet visible, and they turn out to matter anyway. So, what does it actually mean to make the wrong decision? Because I think the fear of it is often larger than the reality. In my experience, the wrong decisions, the ones that cause the most harm, the ones that people most genuinely regret, are rarely the ones made with doubt still present. They are usually the ones made in one of two ways. The first is a decision made reactively, in the immediate aftermath of pain, from a place of pure emotion, without structure, without a moment of considered reflection. The decision made in the first hours after discovery, the ultimatum issued at 2 a.m, the text sent before the feelings had chanced to settle, the decision to cause real harm by telling everybody you know about what a terrible person your partner is. The problem is, when we make those decisions which feel right in the moment and they offer some momentary relief, we then have to live with those decisions, but they've been made on an impulse, on an emotional wave that is temporary. A permanent decision has been made off a temporary feeling. And it's not because they were made with doubt, but because they bypassed the doubt entirely. The second, and probably more relevant for today's conversation, is the decision that was never made at all. The decision to wait until certainty arrives, which, as we've established, means waiting, indefinitely, because the certainty doesn't come, and the non-decision extends, and the cost accumulates quietly, but it builds over time, I promise you, and that opportunity to build something new, whatever that something would have been, passes. That is the decision I'd most want you to be afraid of. Not the decision made with 5% unresolved, the decision to keep waiting until 0% is unresolved. Because 0% never arrives. And mistaking that waiting for wisdom is one of the most common and the most costly errors I see people navigating betrayal experience. So what does a more honest approach look like? Not certainty, not resolution, not the absence of doubt, structure, a container, a decision that doesn't pretend to know how you'll feel in 5 years, but that commits to a specific, bounded next step. What are the conditions you need in order to be willing to try the next stage of this? Not the conditions for a guaranteed outcome, the conditions for a genuine attempt. And what's the review point? Not forever. Maybe it's a month, 3 months, 6 months. A specific moment in time where you've agreed with yourself or with your partner or with your coach or therapist to reassess honestly. Not to have resolved everything, but to take an honest look at whether what's being built is real. A decision with a built-in review point is often more honest than one that presents itself as final and certain from day one, because it acknowledges what's actually true, that you don't know how this turns out. Look, before I go any further, you don't know how this turns out. Because if you did, you'd have been able to predict everything that you're experiencing right now. And I'm guessing that you probably hadn't, at least not in the way that it actually unfolded, in the way that it actually occurred, and certainly not when you entered into this relationship X amount of years ago. But also that you're making the best choice available with the information that you currently have. It's easy to beat ourselves up about decisions made in the past, but that's because we didn't have all of the information. And I don't just mean the information about what our partners were or weren't doing. I'm talking about us, our understanding of ourselves, our awareness. We're constantly evolving and growing. And at the end of the day, you can only make a decision with the information that you have. Also, that you reserve the right to reassess when you have more information. And that you are, despite all of that, willing to move. That is not weakness. That's probably the most courageous version of decision-making available to you right now. Not certainty, willingness. The decision that you're most afraid of making might not be the one that you think. It might not be stay or leave. It might not be trust or don't. It might not be move forward or hold still. What if it's this one? The decision to stop needing to know for certain before you move. Because that's the decision underneath all of the others. The decision to accept that 5% of doubt is not a reason to stay frozen. that waiting for a certainty that doesn't exist is not prudence. That the most honest decision you can make might be the one that acknowledges openly that you don't know how this turns out, and yet you move anyway. Not recklessly, but with structure, with conditions, with a built-in point at which you honestly reassess, but forward. Because the only way through this is through it, and through it means choosing, imperfectly, with doubt intact, from the middle of the circumstances that you're actually in, not from the imaginary calmer version of them that you're waiting to arrive. Before you move on from today's episode, I want to leave you with a single question. Not what should I decide, not how do I know what's right, but what conditions would I need to place to be willing to take the next step? Not to guarantee the outcome, just to take the step. Because that question might be more answerable than the one that you've actually been asking. And if you want help building that structure, the conditions, the container, the boundaries, the honest review point, it's exactly the kind of work that I do together inside the one-to-one coaching and the After the Affair Collective. You can find out more by reaching out to me. Come and visit me at Instagram. Drop me a DM, send me a message at MyLifeCoachLuke. Or if you'd prefer to do via email, that's absolutely fine too, luke@lifecoachluke.com. Until next time, please take care of yourself. I'll talk to you soon.